sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, with a brief absence due to inclement weather and sickness, there's nothing that will stop this show from what we are doing and what we are about to always talk about, and that's everything sports. And here is, of course, your one and only host, Jake the Snake Silva, here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening, thanks for making us part of your day. My co-host, Dave Steph, is joining us. Listen, Ohio State and Texas, the stage is set, and I'm telling you, I got faith in Ohio State. I just think nothing of what they've done in these last two games have been fluke. I think this is a team eager, pissed off, and they want to make a statement. Now, again, Texas, it depends on how this is going to go down, but it's a really, really good one thus far. But, man, we even had a very good one last night with Notre Dame and with Penn State. Can't wait to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, last night was a true testament to how raw and, unpolished Drew Aller is because, the dude just turned 20 years old. He's a very young guy. Everybody's saying that he's a terrible quarterback, but yet really hasn't had a chance to show what he can do. I mean, we like everybody thought that Sam Darnold was, going to be bad coming into the NFL, and he was. But then, with some polish, some, time, he actually turned out to be a pretty decent quarterback. And I think that Drew Aller, going back to Penn State's really going to, show him the right way to do things.
Yeah, and so this is the thing that we are going to focus on here with it. So let's start with Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, because the thing you're witnessing right now with Notre Dame and with Marcus Freeman, this is turning into a program, whether they are in a conference or they're not. It's turning into a program that's going to be fun to watch for the next few years. And Notre Dame, you know how extremely hard that like the schooling itself is to get into. It's extremely hard. Okay, a Catholic school that doesn't just take any Joe Schmo from off the street. Okay, they take arguably the most focused, the most ready, and probably the most predetermined individuals that come into this very campus and into this very school. And they're very strict. They have a lot of standards that they hit. And the question mark has been for Notre Dame, because then not being in a conference, how could they possibly be taken seriously? Now, Notre Dame, what's different about them than it has been in the last few years is that they're very traditional. And we know that for a fact. Last time this team won a national championship was in 1988. Okay, and we all remember some of the glorious days of Notre Dame. Everybody also remembers watching the old, football film of Rudy. But they're so traditional. The thing about Marcus Freeman, what I really like about him, and Colin Cowherd ended up calling him the Sean McVay of college football, the new innovator. To me, I feel like Marcus Freeman is what college football loves to really kind of build more content around. is because when you get, and this is why college football is always so classic, because there's always a coach, the one that's hungry, the one that's determined. And you know what's funny about this is, and I'm sure Chase has already known the history about Marcus Freeman. He's an Ohio State alumni. So he's already predetermined. He's already somebody who's built grit, and he's the kind that just is like, there's no turning back. And he's the kind that gets the best out of everybody. And how everybody looks at Riley Leonard and their offense and all the rest of it. I mean, I've seen this team in the past where they had Everett Goldson, they had Manti Te'o, they had Tyler Eifert, they had John Carlson, and they even had Brady Quinn. I've watched Notre Dame teams for the last few years. Okay, they'd always seem to be the middle of the pack program for them not being in a conference, and yet they could never get over the hump. Well, what's different about this year, this team, and I knew this going into this game, was they were going to come out the most hyper-aggressive physical team. That's what Marcus Freeman's identity is. More of a defensive-minded coach, a guy that's predetermined to attack, and at the same time, get the best where their offense is going to move the chains. And so I know that this didn't even look like, a pretty game. There was parts of it because of, penalties looked kind of ugly. And then in the end, the Drew Aller throw that was kind of more the mistake on their end. And I'll get to Penn State in a little bit. But I just watch how determined Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman really is. And I think this is understanding why that he ended up getting noticed a lot from the NFL as far as being a culture-setting coach. Give this puppy time to cook, because I believe Marcus Freeman is there to really shape not only just the program, but I also think making more of college football so unique. And like I've said before, college football is very tribal. Okay, it's the kind that there's stories everywhere. And at the same time, coaches get hired, they get fired, they get moved on. Players now with the NIL and the transfer portal, they move here, they move there, and then they get paid all sorts of money. It's different in college football these days than what it was beforehand, where it was strictly recruitment. It was strictly determination and commitment, and that's all it was. Well, with this whole NIL deal, it's kind of shaping a lot of things around. Notre Dame is by far the hardest school to ever get yourself into, okay, because they will not take average as, okay, you're accepted. They won't. Okay, that's how hard Notre Dame is. And you have to think about it too. Look at the top players in Ohio State. They cut a lot of them. They got a lot of the top-ranked players. Penn State even had a couple of top-ranked players. Georgia and Alabama, they always seem to have top-ranked players almost every year in the SEC. I mean, that's just kind of the whole pool. Notre Dame only has one. They have one. That's how hard it is. Okay? Not everybody is acceptable in Notre Dame. That's not how it works. But the only thing that Notre Dame that I could see a lot of Marcus Freeman's identity is, they're predetermined, they're gritty, and they fight with a lot of passion. And I think you're seeing that from somebody, and like I've always talked about, and even a perfect example when you look at Jim Harbaugh, because as we've said before, Jim Harbaugh has always been a culture-setting coach. Okay, you may not understand him and you may not get him, but in his days, in his days in San Diego, in his days in Stanford, in his days in Michigan, okay, in college, all right, you take a tech program in Stanford who was 1-11, and you get Andrew Luck as arguably one of the top quarterback prospects in the country, and they turn him into a winning program. They then become bowl eligible, and they end up winning a couple bowl games. That's just how good Jim Harbaugh is. It was enough to get him noticed to end up entering into the NFL side of things. And we all know the history with the San Francisco 49ers. Took him to an NFC championship and then eventually got him to a Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick. And so Marcus Freeman has a ways to go. But I love what Notre Dame is doing. And look, they may not look pretty on offense, but I like Riley Leonard. And he may not be physically gifted. He may not be that be-all, end-all type quarterback, but he's good enough that is going to help Notre Dame move the chains, which is why I think, this is going to be an interesting national championship. Whomever wins between Ohio State and Texas, I've got my money on Ohio State. I'm not sure what Chase is thinking with as far as his fellow fan of Ohio State, but I've got my money on them. I think it would be much more interesting because of the fact that Marcus Freeman would be facing his alma mater. And it would make perfect sense. So you're watching before you somebody who's flourished under one program and is really turning things around in another. And this is post Brian Kelly. And listen, not to misconstrue things, but even Brian Kelly, as good of a coach that he is, couldn't quite get over the hump in Notre Dame. So I feel like there's more of a chance for Marcus Freeman. So I'm excited for Notre Dame. I feel like luck is really on their side, just like what the caption says. But this is a team that's predetermined. They're gritty. They're hungry. They play very good, hyper-aggressive physical game on defense. And that's the kind of thing that wears out a lot of opposing offenses. I'm telling you, I think Notre Dame would make it absolutely viewership friendly. I mean, who knows? Could it be to the point of like a USC versus Texas in the national championship? Not sure. But this is the kind of stuff college football thrives off of. Now, I do want to focus on Penn State. So I like James Franklin. I do. And I think Penn State, because they have been a very good middle of the pack program for a long time. Okay, they produce very, very good players. In the last few years, I mean, hell, they've produced very good edge rushers from LeVar Arrington to Micah Parsons and probably what they're going to do with Abdul Carter. But Penn State has never truthfully been that quite dynamic on offenses in recent years. But I mean, I love Tyler Warren. The kid is absolutely immaculate at tight end. Probably the next big thing since Brock Bowers. Okay, does he match up to the similar level? Probably not. Brock Bowers has been arguably one of the best tight end prospects in the country for the last few years. But Tyler Warren, he was something else. I love their duo run game that they have because, one, he's hard to really tackle, shaves off a lot of tackles. I'm not sure how many he's had all season long. And then they've also got their other ace in the hole, Singleton, who comes in and he bursts in with speed. And then there's Drew Aller, who shows bits and pieces of promises of being the type of quarterback. If only they can go and get him into a place where they can refine his skill set and make him even better than what he is as of this moment. But Penn State in the Big Ten Conference, okay, they have shown glimpses of them to be competitive. They just haven't been able to find their way to get over that hump. And granted, yeah, they made it into the Big Ten championship, lost to Oregon, but listen, it's not even that big of a deal to them. Neither is it a big of a deal to Ohio State to lose to Oregon and then them not being in the Big Ten championship because they're playing Texas right now for the chance to appear in the national championship. That's what Ryan Day really wants. But James Franklin, there has been concerns about him of, is he really that coach? I like James Franklin, and I do believe that there is going to be an opportunity for him to get over that hump. When will it be? Only time will tell. But Penn State, we knew this going into this game against Notre Dame. It was going to be played physically. However, they both were going to match each other that way on defense. But it was going to come down to that last possession. But that throw with Drew Aller, had that not happened, it probably would have been a different game. I mean, it was already getting ugly by the time that the penalties started to come around and these crucial calls. And then all of a sudden, to put icing on the cake, that was the Drew Aller throw. Okay, that's the one thing that really changed a lot of things. But I give credit to Penn State. I mean, they've played hard. And many people have said that Penn State has had the easy way in potentially to the college football national championship. They probably may have. But you got to think about it. Penn State had to face off against SMU. That was barely any competition. I know facing against Boise State may not have looked as close as what the score gave us, but it was a hell of a game. Penn State only outmatched them physically. I mean, that's what Penn State does. They got ready for Ashton Genty. They shut down the run, and their defense played exactly to their strengths. And Drew Aller, when you watched him throw dimes against Boise State, it kind of carved up their defense. But in the end, Penn State and Notre Dame, they both were going to play each other and match each other's physicality. And it just so happened Notre Dame was the one that came out on top. But doesn't mean Penn State, they're going to regress. They're going to go backwards. They play in the Big Ten. It's a more physical caliber conference. And it's also something that Penn State, when was the last time they were ever dynamic with their quarterback? Okay, I watched them with Christian Hackenberg. I watched them with several other quarterbacks over the years. I mean, Drew Aller, say what you will, is good enough to at least give you the throws that you're looking for when you come to executing offensive plays. And even when you've got arguably the most fun watching tight end in Tyler Warren, and you've also got a dual running back set that I think is fun to watch. You got the one who's more of the bell cow there that's hard to tackle, hard to really kind of pull him down, and then the other one that gives you more burst of speed. Penn State is going to be fine. Okay, and I know how Penn State fans are feeling right now. They're disappointed. And sure, they should be, but don't bury your head in the sand because of what the outcome really gave them. I know part of it was it could have been different play calling. It could have been a different execution. Or if those calls had not been made, probably would have been a different outcome. But Penn State, mark my words, they will eventually be a team that will have their next come up. They will. Because, I mean, look, it's not easy when you're in a conference, when you're playing Ohio State, you're playing Michigan, you're playing a lot of these physically caliber teams. It's not. And Penn State, they know that. They're built for it. That's why Oregon, even with them winning the Big Ten, congrats. You won your conference, but you looked like a Pac-12 team in the playoffs. We knew that the second you faced Ohio State for the second time. But Penn State, I mean, it could have been interesting all the way around. SEC is probably quaking in their boots because Texas is their only last hope as far as crowning that the SEC still lingers around in college football. But truthfully, it's both the SEC and the Big Ten that sets the standards of what it should be. But again, when Jim Harbaugh left Michigan, you knew this was going to be the year for Ohio State. You knew that. But even when Nick Saban left the SEC, everyone else, like Kirby Smart, Brian Kelly, even the coach at South Carolina, and several other coaches, they knew they had to step their game up in that conference. But the Big Ten, I mean, Ryan Day, say what you will, it's going to be his opportunity, whether he actually solidifies himself and redeems himself to win a natty for Ohio State. James Franklin, I mean, he's got potentials there. But eventually, when will he get over the hump? That's the question everybody's waiting for. But I'll guarantee you one thing. Penn State is not going to be any stranger here. They will eventually make their mark. And I felt like that game last night with the two of them was just fun. It was just fun. Notre Dame, they came out on top, and that's the end of it. Chase, I will say, though, as someone, as a fellow fan of the Big Ten, with Ohio State, I mean, Penn State, they know they have a ways to go. And I know the record does hinder on James Franklin, but that was fun. And at the end of the day, I know Drew Aller, and I think when he comes into the NFL, of course there's going to be some refinement and polishing of him as a quarterback. But I've seen Penn State with Christian Hackenberg. I've seen them with previous quarterbacks in the past. But it's like Drew Aller was at least the best that you could get that was going to make guys like Tyler Warren work. And then at the same time, you got a dual-headed running back system that I thought was fun as well. I mean, watching that against SMU and Boise State, it's like the bell cow that they had. He was a problem. You couldn't even pull him down on the ground. But I think initially that was what it was. It was pure physical defense, but eventually Notre Dame just got the last laugh of it. But I just think it's so unique about college football when you get someone like Marcus Freeman, and that just solidifies why the NFL was curious about him as far as being the culture-setting coach.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the last quarterback that we've seen that was like, somewhat toolsy would be Trace McSorley. Yeah. And we saw how he was with Penn State, and he lost one game the entire regular season that he had there, and that was to Ohio State, and that was a very close game. That was like 17-14, and he barely lost that. Now, I do think that Drew Aller, if he had like at least one more wide receiver, he would have done a lot better, because he had not a single wide receiver caught a pass and got over like 50 yards. I think the most or the biggest play that we've seen, or the most yards that we've seen, was from Tyler Warren, and that was it. And for a big name Big Ten school, you would think that they'd have a lot better wide receiver core, but their wide receivers are garbage. And I'm telling you this right now: if he had like a Emeka Ibuka, if he had like a Jeremiah Smith, if he had like a Isaiah Bond or a Tez Johnson or something, we would be singing a whole different praise with Penn State being in the national championship rather than Notre Dame, because I do think that Drew Aller, yes, he still has a lot that he has got to learn and needs to be polished and refined, because again, he's 20 years old. But I do think that if you had more help for him, it'd be a whole different ballgame right now. And I was rooting for a Penn State Ohio State national championship. That would have been two Big Ten teams battling it out, showing the Big Ten dominance again. Like, that would have been great.
And this is the thing, is I've been saying this to everybody, is because initially before the game started, I know James Franklin made the comment of Notre Dame not being in a conference, and it'd be better if everyone was in a conference, which I understand that. But you just saw the identity, and I've been screaming to this for people for years, is that Notre Dame, truthfully, is a Big Ten program. They just don't want to admit it to themselves, because we know with the money, the television deal, all of that, they're fit for the Big Ten. And it's just like, and you saw that exact identity that game last night. And that's why it was like, I know it's been frustrating. It's been frustrating since the dawn of time with Notre Dame. But what would you expect of them if they're getting all this money from NBC? And that's what's going towards, them with opportunities to recruit kids, to keep the program strong. Because again, no Joe Schmo is able to get into Notre Dame. Not one. Okay. They're not going to accept average. Okay. They're going to accept quality leaders in that program. That's how hard it is to get into.
The minimum GPA you could have is a 3.5.
Yeah. And they're not going to take just about anybody. That's what's hard about Notre Dame. That's why it surprised me when you look at teams like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and hell, even Texas, with the amount of their ranked players, right, in the country. Notre Dame only has one. That's why it was like, it just makes sense about Notre Dame. But the fact that they're playing with this predetermination and grit is part of Marcus Freeman's identity. And so that's why I think it'll be fun to watch Notre Dame for the next 5 years. If he's still the head coach, I'm telling you, that's what college football loves to watch, is something like that. Because, you're going to have your SECs, you're going to have your Big Tens, you're going to have all those. But then, of course, there's the Notre Dame, the out-of-conference program that we know has the coach that we know is young and hungry, and the one who just so happens to be an Ohio State alumni. Like, that would just be fitting if Ohio State ended up winning tonight and then Marcus Freeman has to face his alma mater. Like, it's unheard of.
I mean, Notre Dame has one player that's ranked as a first-round grade, and that's Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah, one. That's what I'm saying. So it's like all these other programs, they have more than one. That's why I was like, it doesn't make sense, but it only makes sense about Notre Dame.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. Like, it's very tough because I thought that Penn State game was going to go into overtime and everything. And, you know,
that's what people were pushing for.
Yeah. I mean, call me a homer if you want, but like, if Ohio State somehow miraculously makes it into the national championship, I can see them running all over and dominating Notre Dame just because they've got the offensive firepower, Ohio State does, to compete with Notre Dame. And defensively, Notre Dame only has 2, maybe 3 good defenders on that team. Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, and I think one of their linebackers, I can't remember his name.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And that's the thing is that they're going to try to outmatch you physically. But we know Ohio State has so much of the talent on offense. I mean, hell, Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman. You got Will Howard and, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. They just have guys on offense.
And Ibuka.
Yeah, and Emeka Ibuka. So that's why I think it would just be difficult for Notre Dame to truthfully hold on to it. Because I'm telling you, and it's the same way that I even said about Texas, is that if Ohio State has a 2-score lead, forget about it. Because Ohio State's going to run with it. So if you allow them to have a 2-score lead, it's over. Because Ryan Day is just going to basically put it all into full throttle, and the offense is just, they're going to be let loose. That's why. So that's why I'm like, with what Texas looked like in that last game against Arizona State, you do not want to look like that against Ohio State. I promise you that. With that defense and with Caleb Downs, like, again, blown coverages. I mean, yeah. Oh, Arizona State should have probably played that secondary differently against Texas because then it would have been a different game. But I'll guarantee you one thing. Ohio State with Caleb Downs and several others on that secondary backfield, yeah, totally different ball game. But,
absolutely.
Yeah. Got lots to talk about. There was so much activity this week. And I know it kind of sucks because, I mean, like, we had inclement weather with snow, and Denver, apparently, it seems like they're getting snowed upon because they know they're facing Buffalo. So it's like they had to ask for snow to get ready for it against Josh Allen in the north, in state New York. So it makes it so understandable, but so much to go around. We'll talk more about it. Plus, we even have this 2 things that are special treats for you because finally, and we've been waiting for this, now that the top 10 draft picks are now set. Now, remember, these are no trades. This is strictly just what they are. And we're going to basically figure out what we believe they're going to draft. And then we also have our playoff prime predictions as well. We finished the regular season. Now we get a chance to really showcase our playoff prime predictions. So that's good.
Yep.
So, of course, with the playoffs now around the corner for us at BetUS.com, is the most fun time of year to sign up and get involved because you don't want to lose your place in the NFL playoffs that kick off tomorrow. What a day, what a week, at least close to a weekend that we would love to have. We had Notre Dame and Penn State last night. Ohio State, Texas tonight. What do we have? 2 playoff games tomorrow? And then the rest of the slate on Sunday? We
got 2 tomorrow, the Ravens and Steelers and Chargers and Texans. And then we got 3 on Sunday and then 1 on Monday.
Yeah, because I know they moved the 1 due to the fires, which I'm hoping and praying everybody stays safe out there in California due to those ferocious fires in the Palisades. But,
the Rams and Vikings on Monday.
But because of all that, why not get yourselves involved with what BetUS has to offer for you with playoffs starting up around the corner? It's going to be fun. It's going to be jam-packed. It's going to be everything you can ask for. Not to mention having your very own personal account manager to get you on the edge of your game and experience why BetUS, their award-winning sports book for over 30 years, is the best in the country. And then not to mention, they help you to decide with analytics and with all of the best analysis possible for you to make your best bets on all of the parlay leg bets for you to choose from. And then also some of the best casino games, but also NBA action, NHL action, and more and more. BetUS is your friend when it comes to the most award-winning sports book and all of the best parlay leg bets for you to get you on the edge of your game. Gambling problem, however, call the number on your screen at 1-800-GAMBLER or seek therapy in your respective states because BetUS doesn't want you to gamble irresponsibly. Remember, link in the description to sign up. $50 or more into your deposit with matches up to 125%. That matches you up to $2,000 in bonuses. The more you deposit in the first 3 deposits, more chances of you to win big, especially on playoff football. Don't miss out on it at BetUS.com. BetUS, where the game begins.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Snake Sports Talk Show is sponsored by Muscle Tech, with hundreds of supplements and vitamins to choose from, all packed with 100% all-natural proven ingredients. You can be sure that Muscle Tech will give you the edge and the boost to train and look like your fit and healthy best, whatever your goals are. Try Muscle Tech today and use promo code SNAKESPORTS to save 30% off your purchases.
Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
So Chase and I, we've been prepared for this for quite some time now because, of course, we've done this twice. And now we're on the third and final of our top 10 NFL draft pick mock drafts. And listen, we may have an idea of what some of these teams might actually be doing. So we're going to be going back to back up on this one like we have been before. So as it shows, we've got the Tennessee Titans who have the number 1 overall pick now. Then it follows to Cleveland, the Giants, the Patriots, the Jags, the Raiders, the Jets, and then it goes all the way down to 10. Now, I do believe that it shakes up a bunch. Now, remember, there are possibilities of trades, but we're going to strictly do the draft picks that we do believe could be a possibility for them. Now, it may not be exactly what it is, the way that it's shaped. We know that there's going to be movements here and there, but we're going to make it happen any and every way that we possibly can from here. So we'll start it off with the number 1 overall pick, the Tennessee Titans. So the Tennessee Titans, as you know right now, they're lacking up on a bunch of pieces, both offensively and defensively. Now, word has been said that they plan to retain Will Levis So they're not going to be drafting a quarterback. More than anything else, I feel like there's a part of them that needs to upgrade on offensive weaponry more than anything. So to me, I know it may be crazy, but I feel like the Tennessee Titans would take Tetairoa McMillan. It just makes so much sense, and the only reason of this is because since they traded away A.J. Brown and they drafted Treylon Burks, how did that turn out? It was terrible. And at the same time, you're trying to get the best weapons for Will Levis to work. Now, we know it's Brian Callahan's first year as a head coach, but they fired their GM in Rand Carthon. But the whole idea of it is that the Titans, they know that they got their tackles. They may be looking for offensive line help as well, but I just feel like as far as offensive weaponry, because I have Calvin Ridley, I also have Tyler Boyd, I got to have somebody in there because eventually Tyler Boyd, he may not even last that long. So that's why I think with Tetairoa McMillan, it just makes too much sense for me for Tennessee to upgrade their offensive weaponry. That's who I have the Titans picking there at 1.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't go with Travis Hunter because I know that they need they need a corner badly and a defensive cornerstone piece. And, if he's planning on playing wide receiver, that kills two birds with one stone. Now,
I just feel like it's kind of wonky. Like, just from the team set, it just kind of seems like it's a little wonky of a fit.
But a wide receiver number 1 overall, you don't usually see that. I mean, the last one that we had was like Keyshawn Johnson, I think, was the last wide receiver number 1 overall. So, like, if they're going to go any route, I see them going Travis Hunter just because, like, it would almost give them a verification to pick him because not only would it be a wide receiver, but it's also a defensive need as well for them. Or I could see them going Abdul Carter to get some more pressure off that edge. So not a bad pick. I could understand why you picked it. So not a bad choice at all. Now sitting here at 2 for Cleveland, my Cleveland Browns, I've been seeing a lot of different reports saying that they might go QB, they might not. They might trade back. They might not. It just depends on what they can get, who they can trade with, things like that. Yeah. But if they sit here with this pick, there's 2 guys and 2 guys only that I can see them picking if they don't go quarterback, which I don't think that they will this draft. I really think that they're going to look at the veteran free agency and go from there. And then they're also going to look at, like, later in the draft, like maybe a Quinn Ewers, a Jackson Dart, or a Will Howard or something. So with this pick, I can see them choosing Travis Hunter.
All right. Wow. So you think he's going to end up being wide receiver for Cleveland, or do you think he might end up being corner?
He'll play both. He'll definitely play both. I know that Hunter wants to play both, and I know that Jim Schwartz will use him on the defensive side of the ball, and then with Kevin Stefanski's offense, they're going to use him in like a trick play packaging and make it to where like he can be like on a jet sweep or like kind of a motion off the edge or whatever it may be. It's going to be some kind of like crazy packages and stuff that they're going to come up with and scheme for him. I could either see him or Abdul Carter being chosen. Pairing Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett would be absolutely insane. Those are the 2 guys I could see them choosing.
Or maybe there might be some multitudes of trades that Cleveland might do. Because again, we've heard reports about Denzel Ward. We've heard reports about Myles Garrett. So if that was ever the case, you trade Garrett away, you then get the edge rusher in Abdul Carter, who then would be the next promising edge rusher.
I mean, Barry did say that Garrett's sticking with the Browns. He's not going anywhere. He's going straight from Cleveland to the to Canton and everything. He said that at the end of the year press conference that he plans on bringing back Nick Chubb, plans on keeping Myles Garrett here, and then Denzel Ward says that he's going to stick wherever Myles goes. So,
well, that's going to be interesting. But
yeah,
we have an off season, so that's why I think it's going to be exciting at the end of it. Now, the Giants, I think you and I already know that because Daniel Jones clearly didn't work, and listen, I mean, I'm surprised that Joe Shane even retained his job, for one. And I'll get into that a little bit later on after everything's basically done. Because we're going full on, like, full throttle. No news, nothing. We're just going full throttle for this. But this is the time for Joe Shane to truthfully redeem himself. And I just think because of what we've seen with both these quarterbacks, I just feel like this is an opportunity. I think they're going to take Cam Ward over Shedeur Sanders. The only reason of this is because both I know are very mobile quarterbacks. But you've been texting me like nonstop, left and right, talking about Cam Ward almost all season long. And this is the kind of thing that the Giants know that they need the next big thing at quarterback. You cannot, I'm saying, you cannot afford to screw this up, because are you going to tell me that you're going to, like we talked about before, there were multitudes of issues they need to fix. Andrew Thomas is fine, but I don't trust Evan Neal. I got to get some offensive line help. I got to at least get a decent run game next to Tyrone Tracy, who looks promising. And as far as Malik Neighbors, and who knows about Darius Slate, but I know they got Jalen Hyatt as well. You got to get that offense to work. And This is what was kind of hard, because it kind of did a disservice to Brian Dable. That's why I kind of felt bad, because the second that they went and traded for Brian Burns, I'm like, why are they going defense if Brian Dable is an offensive guy? I don't understand this. So I think you do a right service to Brian Dable, and you get him a quarterback for the future. That's where I think the Giants are going to take is Cam Ward over Shedeur. Truthfully. I nothing against Shedeur. I just think that they probably are going to go with more of the high talent, who's mobile, got an accurate arm, and I think he's going to make Malik Neighbors just look stupid ridiculous for the next few years.
No, I agree. I think that, everybody looks at the offensive line issues with Shedeur, and they're like, oh, well, look at what he was able to do with that. But, look at Cam Ward and how he carried the entire team on his back to win games for them, because the defense was so bad. And, the best wide receiver he had was probably a number 2 on a lot of teams, maybe a number 3, and Xavier Restrepo. It's insane. You had the Heisman winner and Travis Hunter be your leading receiver, and Cam Ward had probably a second or third string guy. It's insane. So I agree with you, Cam Ward there. Moving on to the Patriots, here's where I would have chose Tedrow McMillan if he was available, because I think that the Patriots need the wide receiver help badly, but I do hear a lot where they're going to go in free agency and look at bringing in a lot of guys, because you got guys like Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins will be available. You got many different options that you could look at. So right here is where I'm going to give them Will Campbell.
Wow, or Will Campbell, the tackle.
The tackle, yes.
Wow, okay.
Because
you know what, that's not a bad pick either. Because
it's not, because Drake May needs protected. That offensive line was one of the worst offensive lines in all of the National Football League this year. They were ranked at the bottom 10 in pass protection and everything. And what I like about Kelvin Banks and everything is he's a big physical guy, but he's more suited for a run-heavy offense. While Will Campbell has the better footwork and shorter arms, he's more suited for a pass-heavy offense. And with Drake May on that team, I think that you are going to be looking at a Patriots team that is going to be a pass-heavy team.
Yeah. So I agree with that. And I think at the same time, too, I mean, you got to get the run game going with Ramondre Stevenson. So you got to get everything on offense to roll. That's why I think, too, there's reports that because of where they're at right now with Drake May as their franchise quarterback, that's going to attract the destination for someone like Ben Johnson to go there, because they have money to spend. They could spend it an overhaul on offense, and then they could go and draft some of these offensive guys. It's not like defense is out of their DNA. They've always produced very good defenses for the last 20 years now. They've always produced that. So I've never had a problem with New England with that. Now,
let's not act like Vrabel's not the front runner for that job.
Oh, no. Hey, listen. I mean, Robert Kraft's going to try to rewrite his wrongs or whatever. But again, I'm the kind, you know me as best. I'll believe it when I see it. Because look, a lot of all these rumors could be more smoke and mirrors than anything else, unless I truthfully have a resource, and we do, that'll just say, Jake, it's official. He's coming here. And I know a lot of people who are very close to New England that will tell me it's Vrabel. If they told me that, I'm like, great. I believe that source. I'm not breaking it to anybody, but I have those resources. But anyway, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're at number 5. So I don't think they really have a need for offense, truthfully, because they paid for Gabe Davis. They have Christian Kirk, who they tried to move off of, and Brian Thomas Jr. How good has he been as a rookie? I mean, that kid is going to be such a good offensive player that I think is going to be such a problem for a lot of teams, not only just in their division, but in the AFC. And at the same time, you got to get Trevor Lawrence to work with this offense. More than anything, and like I've told you, the secondaries has been kind of suspect outside of Tavon Campbell. So to me, I feel like I would draft Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan. It
100% agree.
Too much sense because you only have, one impactful corner, and then that's it. Everybody else is getting turned. I mean, you have Josh Hines-Allen, your pass rusher, and then, I mean, you've already let go of Caleb Chason, who's clearly going to be back with the Raiders because of how impactful he is, but the secondaries is just so bad. That's why I think if you get a lockdown man-to-man corner in Will Johnson, I think that takes away some of those points you gave up last year. And at the same time, if you get kind of and look, this is, by the way, there's no pressure in Jacksonville because Jacksonville, they're not looked at as that high talented organization that people just respect. The cons are weird. I don't know what I would get with Trent Baalke. Honestly, I thought he would have been fired after Doug Peterson. But again, if you get an offensive-minded coach to work the offense and you get a smart defensive coordinator, I guarantee you that if they draft Will Johnson, that secondary is probably going to be the closest thing than what they had when they had A.J. Bouye and Jalen Ramsey. I mean, you got to fix that. You got to fix that second.
I agree. I 100% agreed with that. Now, moving on to Las Vegas, I think that this one is a surefire lock home run pick that you can't get wrong here. I mean, it really just depends on what Tom Brady thinks of Shedeur Sanders, because that is the wild card factor here. Because if you got Tom Brady, who owns 25% of the team, making a lot of the decisions, he was the deciding factor in letting Tom Telesco go. He was the deciding factor in letting go of Antonio Pierce. He is the deciding factor in picking, a QB. And if he thinks that Shedeur's the guy, they're going to go with him. But if he doesn't, I can see them going a defensive player here. So don't be shocked if they pass on Shedeur and wait until like a Quinn Ewers pops up, a Curtis Rourke, a Jackson Dart type guy. Maybe Tom Brady has said that he likes Dylan Gabriel, so who knows? But right here, I'm going to have the Raiders choosing Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I kind of figured that because it just kind of leads all the way for Shedeur. And I think a part of that is because, like, even we watched the bowl game, and I get it, bowl games don't truthfully matter as much, but you saw a bit of some of the tendencies. Now, I imagine because it may help, it may hurt a player's draft stock slightly, not terribly, but it would land him in a better situation that I think could be built around him. So, and again, Tom Brady's got his hands on this whole thing. So that's why I'm like, he can't afford to screw up some of these hirings. He can't. Because this has been a team, and we'll talk a little bit more about this after, but I just think it just kind of points all in the same direction. Now, the New York Jets, like I've been saying as well, it's actually kind of interesting. So I just feel like that the Jets, more than anything, I think their offensive line is actually not too bad. Now, Tyron Smith, he did announce that he is considering retirement, which, I think, but at least Alou Fashanu, like I said, I was excited about the kid out of Penn State. He's a hit. And then you've got a couple of offensive players. Now, question mark is Aaron Rodgers going to return or is he out? That is the real question upon that. But I think if I had to look at a focus for the New York Jets, I think more in particular, I think the Jets, I knew that they would go defense. And to me in particular, I think they would probably go, this is an interesting one. I could see them go with Mason Graham. Because I think if you pair him with Quinnen Williams on that interior side, because again, I initially thought that Abdul Carter would be a very nice fit if Hassan Reddick was to leave. But because they've kind of settled it and he's just there for right now, maybe you go and you get a Mason Graham and have both him and Quinnen Williams be that force up front. That's probably going to pose more of a problem for interior O-linemen to really contain that. I think it's pretty smart. I mean, again,
not a bad choice. I love it.
I don't think people realize with the Jets, they actually have open options. They're not that terrified. It's just you just got to have the right leader in the front to lead these guys. They have all that potential in the world. It's so talented, and then everybody's like, why are they not winning any games? Well, look at what's happening with leadership, that I think is the problem. So, yeah, they got a lot of options.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, they could trade back here and then acquire a couple more picks, and then, if they don't deem a quarterback worthy, then they could wait and get like a Jalen Milroe in the second round or something like that, and like let him sit behind a Tyrod Taylor if they decide to keep him around for another year and everything. Or maybe they want to see what Jordan Travis can do, so they stick with him. Who knows? But I like the pick there with the Jets. I agree with you. Now, here's where I'm going to pick Abdul Carter. And, with the Panthers, you got to look at them. The three main positions of a football team is you got to look at your quarterback, your left tackle, and then your edge rusher. The three most important positions on the field. And to start building that defense from the ground up, because right now it's just J.C. Horn and Derek Brown that is in the middle of the defense. And then, who else do you have? You got rid of Brian Burns. You don't really have him anymore. Yep. And, you traded away a lot of the other pieces. The offensive side of the ball, you're looking pretty decent with Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, Jatavian Sanders, the tight end. And not to mention you got Jonathan Brooks coming back next year. And Chuba Hubbard's been looking great. So I would say a defensive end and Abdul Carter would be a great fit for the Panthers here.
Yeah, because they need their juice at the edge rusher. They missed that the second that Brian Burns got traded to New York. So you gift them with Abdul Carter and especially pairing with Derek Brown in that front, I think they'd be in great shape. Now, New Orleans, this is an interesting one because, of course, the sources I've got is Cam Jordan and Demario Davis. They may be looking to move off of, and I don't blame them. I told them, I've said this before, look at what the Bills and what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did this offseason. They moved off of a lot of old existing contracts. The reason they had to do that is because they served to be liabilities if these guys were injured, and they're paying them so much. You got to get younger on defense. So to me, I think because, hell, they could have had either of them, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, but I think in my opinion with New Orleans, I would go with Michael Williams, the edge. Because the only thing is that remember when they lost Trey Hendrickson to Cincinnati and they had to repair that with a couple of other fronts, like in the interiors? I think if you put Michael Williams, the next edge rusher after Abdul Carter, you're still going to get a guy who's a threatening force, a guy that's going to give you a lot of those pass rushes and pressures. So I think Williams makes it a very good fit, and it's also getting this team to be younger because they have a lot of cap hell. They need to seriously open up to get them back into shape.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what a great way to start young and build your defense, especially if you got a guy like Aaron Glenn potentially coming in, who is a defensive-minded guy, starting fresh on that defense. When they got Byron Murphy a couple years ago to fill the interior, and like you said, with Cam Jordan, possibly retiring either this year or after next year and everything, you're going to have to look at different positions on that defensive side of the ball. And what better way than to get a guy like that? That's a slam dunk pick right there that you could choose. I could also see them going secondary with like Malachi Starks or something like that as well, because they desperately need that. Now, moving on to Chicago, this is a no-brainer pick right here. I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks because it's either him or it's going to be Will Campbell, because with the way that Caleb Williams was running for his life this season, and being the most sacked quarterback with 68 sacks given up, you desperately need a left tackle to fill in on this offensive line. And then you just need to draft offensive line for your first 3 picks, because holy hell was he on his butt 90% of the season this year. There was a lot of times where he could have made something happen if he had just a second or two left to throw the ball. So Kelvin Banks, a no-brainer pick right there.
Yeah, and like I told you, I mean, the offensive line I thought improved last year. Well, it definitely regressed badly this year. And so, yeah, having a guy like Kelvin Banks really will help them out in the tackle position because, yeah, you've got to protect Caleb. And at the same time, I mean, Caleb, he's going to polish himself up to where he needs to release the ball quicker and at the same time make those quick decision throws. Because that's the speed of the NFL. You can't afford to, hold on to the ball for too long and not make a play. That's not what the NFL is about. I know everybody's kind of like, well, it's not fair to him. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing. Owners don't have time. Hell, even the fan bases don't have time. You got to be able to make it work. And you got to make it better of an environment for Caleb Williams in order to work. So, again, I actually – this was actually a better – well, I wouldn't say that. This, I think, kind of solidified a little bit more of what we should expect in the top 10. It may not look exactly like that, but we have an idea, at least with what these teams may be looking at.
The wow factor for these is going to be the Titans, the Browns, and the Raiders, because if the Raiders trade up and everything, then trade up with Cleveland, then we could see a big movement there. Or if Cleveland stays and they pick Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter and everything. So the wild cards in this is truly the Titans to see who they pick number 1, Cleveland to see what they do if they trade down or keep that pick, and then Las Vegas to see if they trade up ahead of the Giants to get one of their QBs that they want.
Yeah. So my guess would be that, well, yeah. I was almost thinking that if Cleveland, depending on what the decision would be, let's say they potentially traded Denzel Ward, right? And they ended up getting a little bit upward with as far as their draft listing, where they would trade up and Tennessee would move down. Maybe Tennessee ends up getting Denzel Ward to pair up with LeJerry Sneed to help at least that corner group so that it doesn't feel like that they got to get another corner, and then they can go and get a receiver or even an offensive or an offensive interior lineman if that's what they choose to do, because they're not taking quarterback. I mean, they've already kind of made that point that Brian Callahan himself said he wants to make Will Levis work.
And he wants a veteran to come in and everything. But I can tell you this right now, the Browns are not trading anybody. If they're going to trade anybody in the secondary at all, it would probably be Greg Newsome, just because he's owed $13 million this next season. And if they wanted to start over and get a Travis Hunter and everything, I could see them going that direction, because not only would you have him paired up with Denzel Ward, you could have Martin Emerson be your third corner that would come in and be that wild card, and not to mention it would help out Stefanski on the offensive side of the ball. So I don't see them trading Denzel Ward. Don't see them trading Myles Garrett. Andrew Berry's made that perfectly clear in his press conference that they are making sure that they can get back on track with winning again, rather than going and taking a step backwards and trading a lot of their talent away. So with that number 2 pick is where the draft is really gonna get interesting, and where it's definitely gonna start, because we're gonna have to wait and see. Because if Vegas offers to trade their first round pick for next year and a 4th or 5th round pick this year, to move up with us and select one of their 2, because if they want Cam Ward and the Giants are thinking about Cam Ward, then they're going to trade up with us and do whatever they can to get Cam Ward on that team. And, now we got a first-round pick for next year. Andrew Berry would jump on that in a heartbeat.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know what? We've had such a fun ride of a season. Now we're getting into the playoffs tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, It's going to be a little bit interesting because we know right now these are the teams that are solidified into the playoffs. And so wild card week and our edition of the NFL Prime Predictions commence the music. So it kicks off. And wouldn't you know, first time back in the playoffs in forever for Jim Harbaugh. I got the Chargers against the Houston Texans here on the road in NRG Stadium. Listen, last time that Jim Harbaugh was in NRG Stadium was the time that he won the Natty in his alma mater. But aside from that story, though, the Chargers are getting healthier at the right time. Okay, now, they did make a couple moves. Nasir Taylor, their corner that they had that was listed doubtful, he's now moved to the IR. Who they've elevated out of the IR is Simi Pahoko and Eli Apple. So they're coming in, and then they're elevating guys like Eddie Jackson and Jared Patterson. So a couple of guys, they're utilizing any and everybody that they possibly could get. Hell, they signed Zeke because of the possibility of Gus Edwards, who might not be a go. But again, Jim Harbaugh knows how to squeeze every ounce of juice of a lot of these players, including some of them who've been in the league for quite some time. But I think the problem with Houston right now is that I'm not seeing a lot of their consistency on offense right now. Part of that could be Bobby Slowick. Part of that could be the interior O-line is a mess. But the thing is, I love Joe Mixon, and I love Nico Collins, and I love C.J. Stroud. But last year, when we saw them in the playoffs, there was no film on C.J. Stroud. Okay, not a lot of people really could figure him out. Now, again, we know they came in with a top-tier defense with Cleveland last year, and we know what they put up. But despite that, C.J. Stroud has come into a battle-tested year this year where he's been getting hit a lot more. And at the same time, outside of Stephon Diggs and you lose Tank Dell, and then when Nico Collins was hurt, what was he really throwing to? That's the part that I think was the difficult end for C.J. Stroud. So my guess is Jim Harbaugh, he has a blueprint on a lot of things. And he sees this. Eliminate the run game, dominate time of possession, force pressure on the quarterback. Because, again, the one thing that will be the X factor for Jim Harbaugh is developing packages for Derwin James to serve as the Mike linebacker to get pressure on C.J. Stroud with the interior looking the way it is. That is going to be a problem for Houston all night long. I've got the Chargers here as they're favored in this game on the road and winning this game by a possession, 27-20, knocking out Houston in H-Town. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. Well. We're back in this setting again. Now, we know that Lamar Jackson, he's had quite some troubles with Pittsburgh over in the past. But I feel like Lamar Jackson, this is his chance to really get over the top. I'm going to take the Baltimore Ravens here. Even though with Zay Flowers out and not being able to be there, he still has weapons. And not to mention you got Derrick Henry. Now, Pittsburgh, I feel like what my fear is with them, they are looking a lot like the Philadelphia Eagles of last year. They were a team that got hot early in the season, right? And then all of a sudden they're slowly deteriorating and they're coming down. They're coming back to earth. So, again, I like Russell Wilson, but there has been points where the turnovers, the inefficiency on offense, whether that's even Arthur Smith's play calling, all this stuff, just has not been able to add up. I think the Baltimore Ravens and the way that they've been playing thus far this season and getting up into this point is going to allow for guys like Derrick Henry, who's been in this spot, Lamar Jackson, who we know got to get the monkey off his back with Pittsburgh. I feel that the Baltimore Ravens will end up putting up a number, and I think instead of a 10, I think it'll be a 13-point margin. Still will be a good one because Pittsburgh's going to show flashes of being defensive, but I'll take the Baltimore Ravens to knock out the Pittsburgh Steelers because that's not going to be fun at all for Steelers fans. I think the Ravens win this one comfortably at 13 points and win 33-20 over the Steelers. All right, the Denver Broncos and the Buffalo Bills. That's an interesting one. I don't quite trust the Bills money line. I'm going to take the Broncos 9.5 with the plus money line with Buffalo winning. The only reason of this is because if you watched Buffalo's defense in the last few weeks, oh my God, what has happened to them? They've looked like Swiss cheese on defense. Now, whether they are getting important players back healthy, my thing is that yes, I'm not doubting Josh Allen. Josh Allen does many wonders. He's the reason why that your offense continues to cook. Same with James Cook. And then you get, Khalil Shakir, who's been impactful all season long. But it's that defense of yours that's probably going to give you some trouble. Now, Denver, we knew that they were going to get in. And this is where I kept saying to Denver fans, how bad do you want the playoffs? Because this is a team with a very good defense with Pat Surtain, a very good offensive line, and a rookie quarterback that, say what you will, Bo Nix is at least turning the page for Bronco fans for the next 5 years. He is. And with Sean Payton, the only concern I have is Sean Payton getting conservative at the worst time. But I think this becomes an interesting game because here in Denver, we got a bunch of snow. We actually got 2 feet of snow, by the way, all week. Okay? So that just tells you how prepared that they may be for Buffalo. But I think Buffalo, it's going to be an interesting game. I think Josh Allen, they still come out on top. Give me the Broncos money line at plus 9.5 with the Bills to win this game in a thriller, 27-24. So the Packers and the Eagles. Now, the good news on both sides is both quarterbacks, I've heard, are both cleared to play. Now, that's a lucky break for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially when you're at home. Now, the only hard part is Christian Watson done for the season. That's hard. And now you got to trust Romeo Doubs, and you got to trust a bunch of youngsters outside of the healthy run game you have in Josh Jacobs. You then got to hope that defense can be shut down, and especially without Jair Alexander, who I'm told on reports they may be moving off of after this season. They might be. Injury liability. But the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'll be honest with you, they just feel more talented and more experienced than Green Bay. As much as I liked Green Bay through the season when they got hot, but when there was a bit of issue, that's where I felt like Green Bay's just short of themselves. But it's a -5. I like it. I'm going to take the Philadelphia Eagles at home in Lincoln Financial Field. It's better when they're in Philly than they would be if they were in Lambeau. I'll take the Eagles to win and give me a final score of 27-21 comfortably at home in Philly. Okay, this I think is actually going to be my most entertaining game, and that's the Washington Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this could be one that could either be pretty ugly to start, but yet wildly spectacular in the end. I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win here at -3. Listen, Baker Mayfield, since he's come on with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he's had one playoff win, but he's turned this program, or he's turned this organization to where post-Tom Brady, they still are just offensively efficient. Okay, we know we have question marks on Todd Bowles, but as long as Baker has the ball in his hands, and with Mike Evans, they've been very, very good. There's been not a whole lot of problems. They run up scores. Hell, even Jalen McMillan, the rookie from Washington, is already emerging to be a wide receiver number 2, which Chris Godwin, he probably is going to end up testing the free agent market. But I like with what Washington's done. Washington's ahead of schedule. But we know with a rookie quarterback, and this is the same that even goes for Bo Nix. I love what Jaden Daniels done. But I just feel like that Washington still has a bit of ways to go. For Baker, I get the experienced quarterback. I get the guy who's won playoff games. I've got the guy who's been very efficient on offense up to this point. I will take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but watch the scoreboard literally run up like crazy. This may be nuts for you, but give me the over on the over-under. I think this game could be a 35-31 game, and Tampa Bay win. I just see it this way with both their defenses. So that's my prediction. That's my hot take there. And because this was moved on to Monday due to what's happening in Los Angeles, it's the Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams. This is a jam right now because it kind of scares me because I don't know what I'm getting. Because Sam Darnold has looked so good up to this point, and now we get to see him in a playoff. Who knows what that's going to look like? I loved Minnesota's defense, especially with Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, who have been so impactful out of free agency. But Minnesota and Kevin O'Connell, remember, he's got to prove he could beat his mentor, Sean McVay. Okay, and we know Stafford with experience and the record when him, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp are on the field, they have a winning record, and they're very efficient on offense. But I'm going to trust my gut, and I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings on the road at -2. I just think that Brian Flores, he was set for this stage. Okay, there were so many talks about him before the season and during the season, and yet he's up to this point where this is your time to prove yourself. You want a second chance, win me a playoff game. This is the time to do so. And I think Minnesota, I mean, it was ugly last week, in the last week of the season. Okay, put that aside. You now, and this is a neutral field, by the way. So either team is going to have home field advantages. Okay, so that's what's going to be really hard, especially for a team like LA. So I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to come out on top. It may get pretty ugly to start with on both sides, but I think Minnesota, they're going to get back on track, and I feel like they are going to end up on top in this game, winning it on a score 23-20 against the LA Rams. So there you go. Wild card weekend, nothing like it.
I mean, those are good picks. I mean, I would choose the Commanders over the Bucks to win. I would pick the Packers over the Eagles, and I think those are about it for the only ones that I think would be like upsets.
I'm telling you, it is just so hard to even just pick this game between Minnesota and the Rams because, remind you, this is Sam Darnold's important game. Why? Because this is going to prove to him, is he worth the money? Because remember, you could have a resurgence in the regular season, but then this is also even more meaningful if you got a playoff win. Because then, forget about Carolina, forget about the Jets. Sam Darnold in a healthy environment and leading Minnesota to a playoff win is much more meaningful, and that's more money grabbing than anything else. I think at that point, that should stamp Darnold is worth $40 million.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if anybody trades for JJ this offseason. But a live update that just happened, Texas scored. Ohio State had 29 seconds left until halftime. Travion Henderson had a 75-yard touchdown run and just scored. And the Buckeyes get the ball back after halftime.
I'm telling you, man. And what is it right now? It's right now a one-score lead. So I'm telling you,
it's 14-7.
If that game gets to 2 scores for Ohio State's walking away with it. I'm serious. Texas cannot afford to let Ohio State have 2 scores. That's just the name of the game. Because you watch that with Tennessee. Once they got 2 scores, it was over. Once you watch that with Oregon, in that first half alone, it was over. Like, that's why Texas, they can't afford to give Ohio State 2 scores. Because you know that's what's been the thing. 2 scores and it's over. So,
yeah. It's been a very big defensive battle going back and forth with this game today. But if Ohio State scores after halftime, and they had the ball earlier in the game where at the end of the first quarter they were driving down the field, or middle of the second, they were driving down the field. They were at Texas's 38-yard line, and then they had a penalty by Travion Henderson that knocked them all the way back to Ohio State's 48-yard line. So
Yeah. So
It was insane.
So the thing I do want to end up addressing, and God, if it had not been being knocked down with a sickness and then having to deal with snow all week, just to be led up to this point. I mean, look, I've been sitting on this and I've been thinking about it all week. So it's like we talked about with the NFL jobs. There's usually about 6 to 8 openings every year.
There's 6 right now?
6 right now. Yes.
6 right now.
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you, it's just the norm.
Potentially 7, depending on if Jerry Jones re-signs Mike McCarthy or not, because his contract is up on the 14th. So,
So the thing about it is, and I've been waiting to talk about it, and I even talk about it a little bit more on my little exclusive experience show that I have, because I have a lot to unload. But the thing about it is that because inflation was crazy and there's new money that's being made, that all these billion-dollar owners, like, they're getting impatient. And at the same time, they expect results. So the thing that I look at with the qualities of these jobs, and you've heard me scream about it, and I will die on that hill when it comes to Chicago. I'm serious. When we looked at the list of candidates that was there for the Chicago Bears, I look at them like, why am I wasting my time with all these potential coordinators that could be something? You don't know what Ben Johnson could possibly be. I mean, he's a very successful coordinator, and we know that he's been weighing on being a head coach for a long time, right? And so, but the thing is that Chicago, like Los Angeles, like Texas, and like New York, it's a different it's a different brutal type of environment. It is. And that's why I said only Mike Vrabel that I feel like, because again, when you watch Jim Harbaugh and what kind of culture setter he is, that's why the Chargers are in the playoffs, because they turned that around. It's not that they were a completely broken culture. They just needed a new direction. They needed to get back on track because Brandon Staley was wrecking this thing. And so when Jim Harbaugh comes up, it made everything else look so much better. It looks healthier now. Justin Herbert's having the time of his life. And he may potentially win his first playoff game. I don't know. But Chicago, it's more than just trying to get offense to work. It's a lot more than that. Okay, they've always been a defensive culture. But you can't just have any kind of coach in there. You got to have a culture coach that's going to set this standard straight. I mean, because this has been something that's been screaming out of the mouths of Chicago fans for years. Okay, they haven't been in the Super Bowl since 2006, and at the same time, their offense was not as dynamic. But the other thing is that there was too much mediocrity that was in the front offices, and I think a lot of that has to deal with the kids. It has to deal with the kids. And that's why it's like you need to put your egos aside, tuck your tails in, especially you, Kevin Warren. And the same thing when it comes to Ryan Poles. You can't afford to screw this up. So I just feel like it's Mike Vrabel or nothing, because there is no other coach, and I promise you this. This coaching hiring process this year, not as great as last year. It's not. It's like when we look at the quarterbacks in this draft this year, not as great as what we got this past offseason. It's not. So
I mean, it's hard because, like, it just depends on who you are interviewing, because there's a lot of guys out there that, like,
these guys, like, it was just.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, there's a lot of guys that, like, they're not interviewing. Like, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, I feel like could be phenomenal head coaches. Like, I feel like, you know, like, great head coaches. I think that Cliff Kingsbury would work well with the Bears and stuff as well. And then they're either interviewing Todd Monken, Drew Petzing. But there's guys like Liam Cohen that they're not even interviewing. There's guys like, you know, who else? Oh, Frank Smith, the quarterback coach for or not the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator for the Dolphins. I mean, there's been several players that have come out and advocated for Frank Smith, saying that he is one of the best coaches that they've ever been around.
But
in their entire NFL career.
You also got to understand this, and I think this kind of outweighs it because, and I'm sure you also understand this as well, even from like on a workplace perspective. Okay, there's parts where you have the accountants who are like book smart. They understand the numbers, right? They know how to simplify a lot of those things, right? They're not really the noisiest people, right? They're mostly quiet. They're mostly to themselves. They're mostly to like, they're sticking to the numbers. They're trying to simplify things to where you build a brighter future. And then there's the alpha males that we know are not afraid to show off their voice because they're the kinds that you're trying to be a leader of men, right? And so that's where guys are going to buy into that. That's why Jim Harbaugh, he's a leader of men. You're going to squeeze out every single ounce of juice on a lot of these players, and they're bought into that.
One guy I'm surprised that hasn't even gotten an interview with anybody, Jesse Minter.
Well, because here's the thing. I think because it's with Jesse Minter's first year, and remember, I think that Tampa Bay game was a lock. He ain't going nowhere. That's it. Like, because there's still some work to do. And I think Jim Harbaugh, he even said it himself, he will be a great coach at some point, right? So maybe it may not be this year, but at some point he will. And I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to set the tone to maybe potentially have better offerings and maybe have better job opportunities next year. Maybe have better ones that are not like what's happening right now. So that's why, like, with some of these places, and the other thing that I go to is, I think this was said best. The Jets are the most talented team. That's actually a pretty good job to go to. Outside of the Johnsons, you have a talented roster. You just gotta, you just have to simplify this a little bit more. You got to shape this up to where it's consistent. Because like I told you, you don't want to take this defense for granted. Because there are a lot of talented guys on defense. I would hate for that to go to waste. And again,
you need a quarterback.
You do need a quarterback, but it's not like they're in a brutally tough spot. Because I got a very good offensive line with Aluf Ashanu now hitting, and I could probably go get more. But yes, you got to get a quarterback. Running backs, I'm fine with. Wide receivers, I'm fine with. Maybe a tight end could probably help. But I've got defensive players. I do. And ultimately,
what are the odds that the Jets trade up and get a quarterback like with Cleveland instead of the Raiders?
Now, that may be a possibility, but of course, it would depend on who are they going to inquire as far as to end up trading up for. Because, again, there's going to be some sort of package deal involved, whether that's a player that's going to get added in there, but that's a possibility. But, again, I think the Jets, outside of the Johnson crap, it's a very talented roster. You just got to have the right leader at hand. That's all they need. I think
the Jags is a good spot to go to.
The Jags are, in a sense, that because offensively they have a very good squad. Okay, they just need consistency, and you got to let Trevor Lawrence work, because you're not going to pay him all this money and then he just becomes a mediocre quarterback. You're not doing him any service like that. But I think if you give him, and that's why I think it would be good if you give somebody like a Ben Johnson or a Cliff Kingsbury, because there's not a ton of pressure. It's Jacksonville. It's Florida. Okay, like there's not a whole lot of pressure. If you really think about Florida, if you're out there in South Beach, it's cocktails at 9 a.m. Okay, that's really what it is. No pressure, not a ton. And I mean, think about it. Tampa Bay, Baker doesn't have to feel like he's the savior. He came into Tampa Bay with an expectation, I could just be a quarterback. I could just be myself. And he is. And they're back in the playoffs for 2 years. So that's why I think Jacksonville, there's not a ton of pressure there. It works. You just got to get that secondary, like we talked about, really fixed up. And then I think they'll be good shape. Then everything else can now start to move around, because your only good break, you could trade away Christian Kirk if you want, because Brian Thomas Jr., man, is he something special. And then you've already got Gabe Davis, which you hope that he works. But again, there's lots of possibilities, but there's no pressure in Jacksonville. The Raiders, this is what's hard for me to grasp. And I have been telling this to everybody. I'm not saying this from a biased standpoint. Some people might have taken that misconstrued. But I've been a football fan first before I've ever been a team fan. And I've watched the Raiders for 20 years. God, the level of mediocrity is god awful. And at the same time, I understand it's Tom Brady. And I understand this is now going to be their 5th year in Vegas, in my hometown. Okay. And the expectation in Las Vegas now is the standard that the Las Vegas Aces, a women's basketball team who has been back-to-back WNBA champions, and then the Las Vegas Golden Knights, who have been to 2 Stanley Cup championships and won one of those. Okay, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, the Raiders in general, in the last 20 years of mediocrity, and you're not bringing anything to the table, it's like Los Angeles. You're not going to get talked about a lot. So the surprise was 2 things. One, Antonio Pierce getting fired because, number one, players vouch for Antonio Pierce to be their head coach. I mean, they gave up 17 points per opponent when he came in as an interim coach. They smelt something working. The other thing is, and I've heard this from a lot of people, is Aiden O'Connell, they actually let him be the quarterback, and there wasn't a ton of pressure. He was distributing it to a lot of the receivers. Again, the Devontae Adams thing is the Devontae Adams thing. I get it. I get it. But the Raiders, every time, it's like they never get themselves out of second gear. They can't. Like, it's like I'm waiting for some sort of push, and they never follow through. So this is why, like, with the coaching aspect, I mean, I love Antonio Pierce. I really do. I've watched him as a player with the Giants, and when he came in, I mean, he loved the Raiders. Players loved him. And so because he was set in this position to where now they had a losing season and now they're going to be looking elsewhere, just hard. The second thing that was a surprise was Tom Telesco getting fired after 1 year. So I understand there's a point of it because you're trying to set the course for a coach to like find their GM. I get that. It's the same thing that happened with the Chargers before when Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco got fired, but Telesco's been around for a long time. And the reason of that is because Jim Harbaugh, you knew he was going to bring in his personnel. So that's understandable. But I kind of feel bad for Telesco. The reason of this is because you got to account for some of the things he's done right. Okay, he accounted for Keenan Allen. He accounted for Joey Bosa, Mike Williams, Justin Herbert, and then, he counted for Brock Bowers and Jackson Powers Johnson. The knock on Tom Telesco, which I was curious of what he was going to do in his second stint, if he learned his lesson, was could he build depth past the 3rd round? That was always his knock when he was the Chargers GM, is after round 3, it's a bunch of misses. It's a bunch of projects. You don't even know if they're going to hit or they're going to miss. And so that was kind of the knock on Telesco. That's why I think if he went to the Raiders and then he then gets a second chance at year 2, I would have seen if he would have built depth this time. Because you watch the transformation of the Chargers. Okay, they hit on Joe Alt. They hit on Ladd McConkey. Who knows if they hit on Junior Colson because we haven't seen much of him. But they hit on Cam. They hit on Cam Hart and Tariq Steele in the 5th round. So again, there are GMs who were built for a knack for talent in those first initial premium rounds, right? And then there's the GMs who just have a knack for hidden gems in the late rounds. And that's the thing that I think was the difference. But I've watched mediocrity for the Raiders. That's why this is not an easy organization to turn around. So Tom Brady, as much as I love him as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, okay, and having a knack for seeing a franchise quarterback, a knack for having quality coaching, you cannot afford to screw this up. It would be one thing if, like, let's say you were in Jacksonville or a Tennessee or the Jets. Well, maybe, but I just seen mediocrity with this team for 20 years. It's really, really hard. Okay. I watched them go from Tom Cables to Lane Kiffins to however many Jack Del Rios, when they had very good years, but yet never got over the edge. And then they just trade away players like Khalil Mack and Derek Carr and Ari Cooper and Todd. It's like, can the Raiders ever get anything right? That's the part where I really get concerned about. So that was where I had to let that off. Because again, I just don't think people realize that this is a bigger hole to fill, that people anticipate this because it's Las Vegas and because they have a big cap space. I'm sure Tom Brady will get this right. I don't have any doubt in it. But this is a much bigger business than just being a player. Okay, that's the thing. And I'm sure he's business savvy. But I mean, this has been one of the richest franchises for a long time, rich in their history. So that's why it's like you're hoping that you resurrect him from the dead. Okay, so that's the thing. But yeah. I mean, again, they're in a division where you got Patrick Mahomes twice a year, Justin Herbert twice a year, and now you're going to deal with Sean Payton and Bo Nix twice a year. It's different.
Raiders have been irrelevant since 2016.
Oh, God. They've been irrelevant longer than that.
Well, 2016 was the last time they made the playoffs, I think.
It was the last.
No, it was 2020.
It was 21.
21.
It was 21.
Right.
They made the playoffs, but they had so many things that were going wrong. The John Gruden thing, and then Rick Bisaccia comes in, and then they do the same thing where Josh McDaniels comes in. That didn't work, and then in comes Antonio Pierce, and it's like, what the hell? What are they doing? And it's like, do they actually because again, Mark Davis is trying to be like his dad, which he's nothing like him. And because again, Al was passionate and he had no filter. Okay, he was going to do any and everything at all costs, whatever it takes to make the Raiders great. Okay, and that's with arguably one of the greatest football minds, God rest his soul, and John Madden. Like, that's what I'm saying. They're so rich in history, but it's like, unlike Chicago, like, could they ever look through the front windshield instead of looking through the rearview mirror?
It's a good question.
That's what I'm saying. It's a lot. Like, that's the thing is when you dig deeper into the actual history of itself, you'll find out. You'll find out one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say, I'm not saying Ben Johnson or any of these coordinators, they won't succeed. I just don't think they have the mental aspect, like the build, and then the composure set to deal with a culture like a Chicago or a rich history like the Raiders. Now, the Raiders may be different because of the fact they're in Vegas now, relocated. But, yeah, hard. Very hard. I will say, though, it's good to be back. Not quite 110% healthy, but again,
there you go.
I'm going to be fun. I'm going to have such a fun time just watching those two games tomorrow. And I mean, I'll watch the rest of this game tonight. But those two games tomorrow is going to tell you exactly how the playoffs are going to shape.
Yeah, because by tomorrow, you could, if the Chargers win and the Ravens win, and then let's say that the Bills win, you're gonna have a Chargers Chiefs matchup, and then you're gonna have a Ravens Bills matchup.
Bills, oh yeah. I mean, you know what's funny is that like even though like it's just kind of hard because you are dealing with, because if this is the Ravens and the Bills, that's two prolific quarterbacks that people keep debating about every time, right? Like that's the focus. It's not on Mahomes because we know Mahomes is in a group of his own, but it's those two prolific quarterbacks nobody can stop talking about. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. So you both have you have them both in a playoff setting again. Who's going to be
after that 1 o'clock game on Sunday? We will determine who plays who, because like if the Chargers beat the Texans tomorrow and the Ravens beat the Steelers, it's going to determine whether or not, if the Broncos pull out the upset against the Bills, if the Chiefs are playing the Broncos or if they're playing the Chargers. Because at this point in time, the lowest remaining seed would be the Chargers at the 5 seed if the Bills end up winning.
Now, the one thing is because the NFC side of the playoffs, it's talented. Okay, it's very competitive. We kind of know the teams that have that potential to appear in a Super Bowl. Whereas in the AFC, it's like free for all at this point. Now, again, we know about Kansas City, but any sort of shakeups in the AFC, that's why I'm kind of curious of what the AFC looks like, because I don't know what I'm going to get with that. It's like a complete free for all. So I'm telling you, any shakeups in the AFC, it's wide open. It is wide open this time. That's if teams actually figured it out from last year.
Yep.
Like you can't afford to have that repeat of it last year. Yeah. So, well, folks, what a fun show it has been tonight. And we know that we've had all week that we haven't gotten a chance to be at, but at least we came back up on a Friday to make it happen. But appreciate for all of our loyal and faithful fans that have been with us all through 2024 as we start a new chapter in 2025. What a season. But we are only just getting started here in this new year of 2025. Appreciate all of you guys for being here with us, with Chase and myself. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy the wild card weekend. I'm excited for it. We're both going to be geared up for it. Don't want to miss next week's shows coming up here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care of yourselves and enjoy it, and we'll find out who moves on, who will be the odd ones. Take care, guys.